Semi-final round for the 2016 Cabin Fever debates. If you've been following along at home, you know that this is the second of our single elimination rounds that leads to our grand final round. What that means in plain English is that two of these teams that we'll be debating here tonight will advance on to our final round that will happen on Thursday evening. So just some reminders about how this debate is going to work. Like any debate, we have a proposition and an opposition. The proposition is going to argue for the motion. The opposition is going to argue against. But there are a couple of quirks in this type of debate. One of those is that there are actually two teams on the proposition. The opening proposition and the closing proposition. Same goes for the opposition. Each of those four teams is competing for the top spot, or in this case, the top two spots, in this round. So that even though these two teams are arguing for the same position on the motion, they're ultimately trying to do so better than the other team that's doing the same thing, and of course better than the other teams that are arguing against them. We're going to trust our panel of judges to make those decisions about which of these two teams to send through, but they have to evaluate some arguments. So in order to evaluate arguments, we're going to give each of these debaters 1 7-minute speech during which to make their best case, either for or against the motion. We'll start with the proposition side and alternate back and forth until each of them has had that 1 7-minute chance. During those speeches, you're going to hear a series of bells. Those bells sound like this. You're going to hear one after 1 minute has elapsed in each speech, and there's 1 minute remaining in each of those speeches. Those two bells indicate that in the intervening 5 minutes, points of information are allowed. Points of information are those brief interruptions that come from the members of the opposition that can challenge something the speaker is saying or pose a question that causes them to have to respond. Now, points of information are taken exclusively at the discretion of the person holding the floor. So if the primary speaker is speaking and a member of the opposition rises to ask for that chance to ask a point of information, it's entirely at this person's discretion whether or not to take it. They may say not at this time, in which case that person should sit back down, they'll continue on with their speech. Or if they choose to relinquish the floor, that person then has 10 to 15 seconds to phrase that question or to make that argument. They would then sit back down and the speaker would be expected to continue on with his or her speech, answering and addressing those issues that were raised in that point of information in the logical flow of the material that they're presenting. Understand that discretion means that just because they're sitting that person down doesn't mean they're being rude. They're expected to, and perhaps even evaluated by the judges, as to how well they manage those interactions with the opposing side. Usually teams take somewhere between 2 and 3 points of information during their speech, and again, those are relatively brief interruptions during their speech, but that's part of what they're managing. Another thing that you'll notice during this debate is that a lot of audience members will voice their support for arguments or positions that they hear the debaters make. The traditional way of doing this is to pound on the table and say, "Here, here." It's a good time to practice that now, so you're comfortable doing it during the debate. Go ahead and pound on the table. So let the debaters know when you appreciate their arguments or support the positions that they're making. They too will appreciate knowing what you believe and what you're enthusiastic about. We've got a really interesting debate for you tonight, or at least an interesting topic about which interesting arguments could be made. I won't make any predictions about the quality of the arguments yet, although I'm quite optimistic. The motion for tonight is that the state of Alaska should vacate convictions and expunge records of arrest for marijuana-related crimes from individuals convicted or arrested before marijuana was legalized. So fundamentally, this question asks, what should we do with those people who've broken a law that is no longer a law? I think that poses a fascinating question that gets at what we believe about criminal justice, and more importantly, how we believe individuals who no longer commit those moral hazards that we imagine once to be moral harms, that are no longer moral harms. So, fascinating stuff. This round is going to be adjudicated by our panel of judges, led by the indomitable Genevieve Mina, who no doubt will do a fine job parsing the arguments that she hears tonight and leading her fellow adjudicators in that effort to do so. And once again, will be chaired by Sarah Elton. You may address her as Madam Speaker. Now I'm going to turn the control of the House over to her and ask her to call the House to order.
All right. We welcome all the debaters, and we now invite the Prime Minister, Caitlin Roberts, representing Team Alphas, to give a speech not exceeding 7 minutes. Hear, hear.
Good evening, esteemed panel of audience. We, the government, propose that the state of Alaska should vacate convictions and expunge records of arrests for marijuana-related crimes for individuals convicted or arrested before marijuana was legalized here in Alaska. We'd like to provide a brief link model and go through our points of argument. I'll start by defining a few terms. First, expungement. The state dictates the parameters of what having a conviction expunged entails. Since the expungement process does not exist in the state of Alaska, we, the government, are going to define what this would look like if it were to happen here. Expungement refers to the process of filing a motion asking the court to physically destroy a record of convictions and or arrests. Chapo came to Alaska. He would not have his record expunged.
Yeah, so before we passed ballot measure 2, you could still have 6 marijuana plants. You could still have less than 4 ounces so long as it was in your home. So literally, what group are you talking about? Would you please repeat that?
The group who got arrested and have criminal records. Nature of marijuana-related crimes and how they impact taxes. The first impact is on employment. One of the most dreaded parts of the application process of a job is if somebody has been convicted of a crime is the criminal history box. That little box has a big impact. If one of our fellow Alaskans is attempting to find a steady job in this fiercely competitive job market and has only a marijuana-related crime on their record, they have to disclose that on the application. On top of that, any private employer can run a background check and deny a person employment or fire them if they have a criminal record. That makes job hunting even more difficult for these Alaskans who have a criminal record that's something that we don't even consider a crime anymore.
How many people would qualify for your program under your model of who's going to get the records expunged?
Any individual who requested from the state. So I didn't go.
Do you have a number?
Take a number. It's the responsibility of the individual. We don't need to. Individual responsibility. That's the first time, not at this time. The second impact about that having a criminal record impacts loans and investments in the future. Not only do marijuana-related crime records make getting a job incredibly difficult, but also negatively impacts people's ability to do something like getting a loan for a car or house. Why? Because due to the stigma associated with marijuana-related crimes, the financial institution views an individual with a record as high risk. So high risk that they can deny the person an application and not even getting to the loan in the first place. Overall, we think that the stability of a home, provides, is more difficult to obtain for someone who has just a little marijuana-related crime on their record. Our second point we'd like to make is what our world would look like and how we can help Alaskans move forward. We've already told you about how Alaskans have a more difficult time getting a job, and this prevents them from participating in the economy. Having a marijuana-related conviction removed from their record, the person can legally and honestly answer no to that little criminal history box. This opens a whole new world of opportunities for them. If the background check is performed, no red flags will come up, and the person has a better chance of getting the job. We're going to get more people to work, more people putting money in the economy, and we're going to improve the lives of Alaskans.
What loss is it an employer or housing, whatever, has to follow through with that and deny someone? Why can't they ignore it?
Oh, I'll get to that. Don't worry about it. Now let's talk about how Alaskans can continue to invest in their future. Now that we have people who can actually start a family and create stability for themselves, we have Alaskans who can invest in their future as an individual or as a family and access bigger opportunities that had previously been denied them. They will no longer be looked at as high-risk individuals. They will now be a participating member of society. That leads me to how we get more productive members of society. Individuals convicted of marijuana-related crimes aren't busy trying to get jobs or a loan for a house. They're busy being productive members of society. In our world, the culture we now begin to create is shut off and alienated for people who have this criminal offense on their record. They can be spending their time in better ways. In conclusion, we tell you that a criminal record makes life incredibly difficult to live. If a person only has a marijuana-related crime on their criminal record, it may seem like a small thing to us. We can brush it off and say that employers can overlook it, but that's not the reality. Legal records have a huge impact on people's lives, and we have the power to change that in a positive way. We have changed the use of marijuana in the state, and let's keep up the progress and improve the lives of Alaskans by allowing them the chance to change their record to be accurate for how Alaskans view marijuana. It's legal. Those who use it before it was legal should not be treated as criminals. That's why these governments support that citizens have the right to request expungement of their record from the state for these related crimes. Thank you.
We now invite the Leader of Opposition, Neil Kahneman, from Fallacy, to open up the side for the opposition. Here.
moving on. I'm going to go ahead and just move into how I do the speech otherwise. So we came here to have a debate where we can talk about impact groups, and where we could actually talk about people that would be affected, and all of those good things. But as the model that we got described by the Prime Minister, literally no one is affected. Literally no one. Literally no one. If you had less than an ounce before we passed ballot measure 2, you didn't get a misdemeanor, you didn't get arrested, they took your weed. If you had 6 plants, they took your weed. If you had less than 25 plants in your home, you were set. If you had less than 4 ounces in your house, you were set. So the people that they want to tell you that we're going to benefit literally don't exist. We're having no real debate here. I'm a little peeved, but you know what? Hey, it's fine. Nah. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and do this as we normally would do it, assuming that there were real impact groups and they actually interpreted the motion as they were supposed to interpret the motion. I'll just do my case like that. Alright, so assuming that we're let people off for the crimes that they committed, and under their model, we have a few issues. One, if they want to say if everyone has to file a motion individually, we think that this could lead to clogging in the system. So we think that's a bad thing that's going to happen. They say that everyone has to ask for a motion to get their thing vacated. We think that, well, considering the way that how vacations work for convictions and all that, it has to go to the Supreme Court. We think this will cause clogging in the Supreme Court. We think that's a bad thing. But as far as the actual case that they gave you, they tell you that right now people get discriminated against. They can't get jobs. We think that's absolutely okay because employers have rights too. Employers are liable for what exactly it is that their employees do. And if someone knows that the person that they're employing has a criminal record and is maybe likely to commit similar crimes in the future, we think it's in that employer's interest to not hire that person. We think they should have a right to have access to that information because they're liable for the actions of their employee. Alright? So moving on to the constructed case that I'm bringing today. So I'm going to tell you a couple things. I'm going to tell you about the general justice argument. I'm going to tell you about the nature of the crime that the people committed, and then I'm going to tell you about why that data should remain public and why people should have access to that information. I'll take a few line out here. Alright, so the nature of the crimes that were committed. The laws we had in Alaska previous to ballot measure 2 were never meant to punish the end user, the impact group that the opposition is trying, or the government is trying to tell you that we're here to benefit, yeah. The laws that we had in place were only meant to benefit, or were only meant to harm the drug dealers, the high-level distributors, all the people that actually participated in a system that led to Alaska being an extremely violent state, that led to Anchorage being the most violent city west of Mississippi. We were always trying to punish the participation in the system, and that's what we were doing. It was never the end user. That was never the intent of the laws that exist in Alaska. All right. So we think that, for instance, just looking at the system that people participate in when they sell weed or when they do these other things, we think it's the fact that Alaska does just have the highest crime rate. We think that in 2015, that 14 people were killed literally over weed by February. We think that's the kind of system that we're trying to punish participation in. We think the fact that that Alaska produces more weed than it actually consumes, and the fact that we're actually exporting weed, we're trying to punish participation in that system, which leads to weed going to other places in other parts of the country where it causes more violence, where it causes more crime to happen. It's always the participation in the system that we've been trying to punish, never the end user. That's the nature of the crime that people committed. For instance, if someone bought a handgun, we don't punish someone because they buy a handgun. We think that's fine that they can have that. But if they try and buy it from the black market, we punish their participation in the black market. That's exactly how the drug laws we had in Alaska. That's the nature of the crime that we're committed. Second, we want to tell you about the justice argument. We think that there's 2 ways that you can think about how punishment works. We think you can look at it from a retributive standpoint, that you punish people because the act that they committed was wrong, or you can look at it from a utilitarian standpoint and say that we punish people to deter future crime or maybe to benefit them in some way. And they're basically the argument they're giving you is that the point that the law is no longer a crime, we don't need to deter people from breaking that singular act, and so the punishment no longer has a goal. But we tell you that we punish people because the act that they committed was inherently wrong, and that's what we're trying to do. When someone decided, I'll take you real quick.
What we were talking about was we don't consider this a crime anymore. So this is not a crime. The person should be able to have that crime removed from their record to show more
someone saying that they can ask candidates to smoke weed. Yeah, actually, I got asked that at my first job, coffee shops. But like we think that like that's not something that the employer would the person would always tell their employer. We think that the access to those criminal records exists because people have an interest in being able to know that information. When we think it's much better that we have like a system that we can actually rely on. Now moving back to we're like thinking about it no longer being a crime. Yes, but the thing is, at the time that was the law, they broke the law there at the time. We have to punish them, and if that punishment means that they have a record, we think that's fine with that. We think that's how the law works, and we're glad with keeping the law to work like that. All right. So we prefer to just punish people because they break the law. We think that's the best way to view like how the law works and everything. Now the last thing is like why the data should remain public, and I'm just going to give you a quick comment about like exactly what you can get crossed off from the record right now. Like we steal records of minors when they become adults. Like that doesn't exist anymore. We expunge records of arrest for individuals who were wrongly convicted or arrested. Or we set aside convictions for individuals after they finish parole. So like if someone actually committed that crime, they can already set aside the conviction. There's already other means for them. Like literally the laws we have in place force us to have a debate about the people that were selling drugs, about the people that had more than 4 ounces, about people that were running grow operations. That's what the thing was supposed to be about. We look for state laws and see that, but we think that their data should remain public primarily because people have an interest in seeing it, and so we're proud to oppose. Thank you.
We now invite the Deputy Prime Minister, Robert Labrie, to there we go, to come up and give a speech not exceeding 7 minutes. Here.
Okay, so to start our argument, first let me break from our tradition of the format here. Tell you guys, the first thing that I want to say is it's a pleasure to be up here. I really feel honored that we get the opportunity to do this with you, and regardless of how this ends up, I'm really grateful that we got the chance to do it. Now, that being said, let me move into our support. First off, I'm going to begin with a bit of deconstruction, and then we're going to move into a little bit of reconstruction and a little bit of extension. Now, first off, let's talk about our deconstruction. Now, the first argument presented by the opposition was that there is nobody affected by this law. And all I have to say about that is if the bureaucratic government decided that this law needed to be passed, they surely believe somebody is affected by it. Now, the next thing is clogging the system based on the amount of forms being submitted. Now, the thing about that is that this is based on people's participation. So the system is going to get clogged. Not every single person that has this on their record is going to rush out and do it the first day. So there's going to be time to deal with these. Plus, there's systems in place to deal with that type of thing. When the forms are submitted, they have to go through processes. All we do is follow those processes, and everything works out. The next point is the right to discriminate of employers. Now, there are laws against discrimination, and if we allow these people's records to be expunged, that discrimination is unlawful, just like you discriminate against someone that's handicapped or minority, for example. Employers don't have open freedom to discriminate against anybody they like. And the final bit of deconstruction is Alaska doesn't have any current expungement laws. That's what we talked about. We're setting an example. We're setting the precedent for it. So there is no system in place that allows us to currently expunge. Okay, this brings me to our next argument. First off, we talked about the nature of the crimes and the impact on employment. Now, I want you guys to take a moment and just kind of imagine with me, you have 2 neighbors next to you. Neighbor 1, his name is Jim. We'll call him Jim, sure. He's a normal guy, happy family. They have 2 cars, husband, wife, couple kids, that type of thing. Live in your neighborhoods, they're comparable to you. You have your second neighbor next to you as well. Now, Jim gets busted before December 5th when this law passed and he goes to prison for 6 months for possession. Then he comes in, not this time. Then Jim comes out of prison and he suffers the repercussions of getting that conviction on his record, which is exactly what we're talking about. He has to check that little box. So now Jim can't get a job. So Jim can't get a job bringing money to his house, so he can no longer afford his mortgage. His wife either gets a second job or he has to get a second job. Their car starts to get repoed, that type of thing. It all leads to the problem of not having enough income because of the little box because they have this on their record. It's not like murder.
The only way you get a felony that makes you have to take that box is if you have like more than 4 ounces of weed, or if you have more than 25 plants. Like you had to be a pretty heavy drug dealer to have $1,500 of weed in your house.
All right. Okay, so Jim sees the impact of this. Now, then you have the other guy on the other side of you that no longer did not get busted before that became a law. So now he's sitting out every day smoking weed, doing the same thing that Jim did, but he doesn't have those same problems. All we're offering, not at this time. All we're saying is that these two people should be put back on level ground based on, as Prime Minister said, the fact that this crime is no longer a crime. Loans and investments in the future. Let's move on to that now. Now, the other argument is that having these things on your record stops you from doing things like home loans. So not only is this man going to lose his home, lose his car, it's going to impact their family greatly, but he's not going to have the opportunity to recover from that in any way. Because he's not going to be able to get a loan for another home, regardless of the size. He's not going to be able to get a car loan. Now, we talked about discrimination. Let me go back to that. It's not that they're discriminating based on the fact that it was this type of discrimination. People are lazy. They check the box. They don't care what it was. They say, this guy's criminal, and that's it. So he's being discriminated the same way as someone who's a pedophile or a murderer or that type of thing. They don't care the details. They don't often look into it, not at this time. So we're talking about the difference of the type of conviction, and it doesn't matter in this case. All right, now.
Yeah, I mean, next to the box, you need to clarify, if the world that you live in is like real and literally no one cares about weed like that, so you can literally just write in that box, it's just weed, bro.
Let's talk about the way they're going to see that. Now, we all know about stigma. If you talk about a person who smokes weed regularly, you talk about the way that you view them. If you're going for a successful job or for a professional job, if you write, it's just weed, bro. Write that on your professional resume or your application. They're not going to let you get that job, regardless of whether it's expunged or not. Now, we did talk about setting that precedent. Now, it is not uncommon in other states. In fact, many other states have processes for expungement, and that's what we're talking about. In other states, it is the responsibility of the individual to petition the state to reconsider and expunge their record. That, we think, is the important part about this argument, that it is not that we're going to expunge all of them automatically. That would be an immense workload for the state. We're talking about the individual taking responsibility for their own life and submitting their own application for their own expungement. And that's where I'm saying the process will take care of it. These things go through many offices, many people. I'm not worried about clogging the system because the people are lazy. They're not going to get up. They're not all going to file this. It's not going to be a problem. No. That being said, this is why we are proud to support expunging the records of previous criminals.
We now invite Sam Depkin to give the final speech in the top half of this debate. Hear, hear.
I'm just going to start on some deconstruction and move on to some more construction arguments. So first off, I'd like to really talk about the whole thing about the rights to not be discriminated against by your employer. They keep saying that there's you've got rights, you can't be discriminated against by your employer. But we believe that drug convictions are something that employers should look for when they're hiring. I live in Seward, and there was a debate in Seward about weed legalization when the ballot measure was up. One of the people who spoke against it was a local business owner who runs buses out of Seward. He cannot have people who use drugs driving his buses because he is having people driving buses with 60+ tourists on them. They cannot be high, they cannot be addicted to drugs. He cannot hire people who use drugs to drive his buses. So he needs to know if people are drug users ahead of time because because he is the one responsible if the bus crashes. And so we believe it's 100% okay okay for employers to do that. Yes?
Should the employer also ask if the employee uses other legalized substances such as alcohol or any of those?
Yes, the driver can't drive drunk. But employers are still allowed to mandate drug tests, so you should still be allowed to see if people have convictions for these kind of things. Now, kind of continuing with this point about why data is good, I'd like to move on to the example the previous speaker gave about Jim. Poor Jim, who is this conviction. So, we like to say that, clarify that under this ballot measure, really the only thing that's changed is those with, an ounce or less, or 1 to 4 ounces in their home, or a certain number of plants, will no longer have them seized. If they have a felony conviction for having a certain amount of marijuana, under the new law, it is still a felony conviction. So why would you expunge the record and eliminate the conviction of somebody who is still committing a felony under current law? That makes no sense.
In our very first argument, we clarified that we were not talking about crimes that are still a crime.
Well, I'm just directly rebutting the very touching argument. If somebody's serving that long in jail and has that on the record and has to check the felony box, that means they committed a felony, which is still illegal. No felonies were not made felonies under this ballot measure. All right. Sorry. Yeah. So I just like to kind of continue with that point about why data is useful. So first off, with this data, like I said, it's very useful to employers. We think that employers should be able to not hire people who use drugs. It's also very It's also very valuable to the people who live in the neighborhood around people like this. We believe that these kind of records should be public, so people can so it's available to the public overall. All right, and so different argument we want to make is now into some instructive details. Preempting an argument that often comes up in drug trade is that drug convictions and drug laws are very racist and they use racial profiling and are very discriminatory against certain people. But in Alaska, this is simply not the case in terms of marijuana laws.
Okay, so in the mechanism, I'll get into this more in my speech, but actually it is the case. So do you have any evidence to support that claim?
Yes. So in the state of Alaska, 67% of convictions for marijuana are from white people and 8% are from blacks. And 25% are from others. Well, blacks make 4% of the population, 8% of marijuana convictions, so there is a bit of a disparity there, but it is not a huge disparity overall. And overall, drug convictions for marijuana use are relatively along racial lines. And we'd also like to point out on the issue of, in terms of the topic of racial discrimination, Alaska is some of the most lenient drug laws in the country to begin with. So there's really no, we are in the top 5 most lenient states in every category, from maximum sentence to arrest rate per 100,000 population to arrest rate per 100,000 users. We are in the top 5 most lenient, mostly just behind Colorado, Washington, and Oregon. It makes sense for them to be even more lenient than we are. For example, one being caught with, even before the passage of the ballot measure, less than 1 ounce or less on your person, you just got it seized. In some states, like Arizona, anything under 2 pounds, which includes an ounce, is a minimum of 6 months in jail and a $150,000 fine. So we already have some of those lenient laws anyway in terms of that. So any arguments about discrimination in terms of Alaska's marijuana laws specifically are just ridiculous. Other drugs, that's a different case, but it's not what we're debating here today. So if they're trying to tell you that marijuana laws are discriminatory and racist, it's simply not true. And with that, I'm done.
We now invite Sophie LeSean, representing top half, to open up the bottom half of the debate. Here, here.
laws in New York?
So, statistically speaking, African Americans and white people consume marijuana around the same rate. Some studies actually say that white people consume marijuana more. But let's kind of take a tangible example. Let's look at Manusasitna borough that's right around our hood. So, like demographically speaking, Manusasitna borough is around 90% white, 1% black, but you were up to 3 times more likely in 2007. I kind of analyzed the state troopers' data on this. You're 3 times more likely to be arrested if you're black for marijuana possession. That is discrimination.
One quick clarification. 2007, like, we had a ton of crime that year. We were doing a huge crackdown on weed that year. Second, how is this not the fault of, like, racist cops? Like, how is this not the fault of the law and not just, like, racist cops in Matt Newscam?
Well, the cops are the ones that enforce the law. So we think that's really problematic that the people of minority descent who are already statistically more likely to be lower socioeconomic status are losing these opportunities towards like getting a better job, receiving loans. Like, we find that really troubling, and we think that expunging the records would be very beneficial to these individuals because studies have shown that if you have faith in your government and faith in your politicians and faith in your law enforcement, which is especially important given the current context of America where black people are like scared of law enforcement, that if you are essentially like feeling more trustworthy of your government, you are going to be better law-abiding citizens. So that is why we are in support of the motion. Thank you.
We now invite Christian Bohr. Sorry. From Blues Brothers to open up the back half of the debate for opposition. Here.
I like the question.
Alright, so I want to start off today, and I want to clarify a point. In society, we agree to certain rules. And in my opinion, these rules for government are that we follow the laws set forth and made by the people. Now, in this, we recognize that crime is bad. And anybody who commits a crime is bad. So I'm going to start with deconstruction. And I'm going to go to the argument raised that many races are hurt by, or many races other than the white populace are hurt by these laws. But I want to say that you brought up a problem with the criminal justice system and the conviction of these criminals, and not in the laws themselves. The fact is that everyone convicted was a criminal, and in believing that society's laws, society's rules are important, they did a bad thing. Regardless of what race is still wrong. You also said that the expungement of nonviolent offenses does not hurt society, but this takes away the ability of an employer to judge the morality of the person they're hiring. Alright, and then I'd like to go into my points of construction. First, I'm going to talk about how the disregard of law is corrected by the criminal justice system. The second thing I want to talk about is how ignoring the crimes of marijuana possession or dealing, whatever it may be, degrades the value of the law as a law. Now, my first point that the disregard of law is corrected by the criminal justice system. We have set forth that people and us as members of society think that committing crimes is bad. Now, we've created a system, the criminal justice system, which is a correctional system and seeks to correct the actions. And what were the actions? It wasn't necessarily that smoking marijuana was bad, or that having marijuana was bad. It was that you broke the law. And that's what. So, we must allow these criminals who have committed crimes to serve their time, and in doing so, we allow the criminal justice system to reform and allow them to become productive members of society. By not allowing them to go through the reform, they would not have the morality established, or that it's intended to be established by the criminal justice system, that would allow them that's really unfortunate that cops and members of the criminal justice system have not treated that fairly and treated members of society fairly, but that's a systemic problem within the Department of Justice. That's not a problem with how the law was established. So, when people choose to break laws willingly, and they're not forced into the decision to break the law, we need to do everything in our power as society to correct these actions and to put these people in a position where in the future they could not have the desire to break society's laws. Now, my second point, by ignoring crimes, we degrade the value of law as a law. Now, I think that if we begin to expunge individuals, what we've done is we've said, okay, we may have made a wrong decision in the past. We've corrected ourselves as a society, so we changed the law. We decided that the use of marijuana and the sale of marijuana was okay. The problem is that while it may be okay and moral to do that now and legal to do it now, it wasn't moral or legal to break the law in the past. And we believe that these laws must be established and they must be held to high standards, because if we do not value them, what does it say about laws that we currently have? So, government's ability to enforce these laws is diminished when we have a disregard for the laws. So, yeah, I'll take your question.
You're arguing that it makes the law weaker for the government to return and turn over their burden before. But this isn't unusual for the government to do that. If you've ever heard the military reverses medals and awards higher or lower medals based on that, it doesn't make the medal worth less. To give them
well, it's the. Let me try to gather my thoughts real quick. By changing your mind, what you're doing is you're saying that it's okay to break the law as long as it's a moral thing to do. But it's above morality, there is law, because society's law, society's rules, no thank you, is that we follow the laws we have set forth. If you break a law, you're breaking society's main rules, society's cumulative effort to create a better good. And that's really what you're doing when you're breaking a rule. You're not breaking a moral code, you're breaking society's rules. So, I'd like to recap before we believe that crime is bad. And as a whole, society supports laws to stop crime. By disregarding and by expunging these criminals, we do not allow the criminal justice system to take effect as it is set forth to affect society. We also believe by ignoring these crimes, we degrade the value of law. And for these reasons, we are proud to vote.
I now ask Joseph McMahon to be the government whip for the summarizing speech of the government side today. Here.
I'm very excited to be here and present the motion tonight that we should vacate convictions and expunge records of marijuana-related crimes. First off, opposition love to say that nobody would be affected by this. However, 56% of our arrests in Anchorage are because of drug-related, not 56%, I'm sorry, the arrest rate for marijuana, non-violent marijuana-related crimes in the past has been about 1,046 individuals per every 100,000. This means there are quite a bit of individuals who are locked up because of non-violent marijuana-related crimes. Also, Sophie pointed out that the people who are affected of this mostly are African-American individuals who statistically smoke less pot than us white people. These individuals are discriminated against just because of their skin color, not because of the laws per se, but because of the law enforcement who enforces these the application of marijuana-related laws equally applied? The answer clearly is no. The laws may be non-racist not at this time, non-racist, but the people who enforce them are. When we do not apply laws equally, we lose the integrity of the laws. Second opposition, not at this time. Second opposition said that if we do not follow the laws, we degrade the laws. But also, we degrade the laws by not applying them. Just because laws are there and we should follow them, just because the law is there doesn't mean we should follow them. We've had tons of immoral laws. Jim Crow laws, not at this time. Jim Crow laws were there. Should we have followed those laws just because they were there? No, it is the right and responsibility of the people to, when they see an unfair law, to stand up and question that, not at this time. Stand up and question it and actually decide, is this moral? Is this what we as a society say is right? And with marijuana, we voted no. We said this past year that it is not a crime that we should punish people for just because they have a small amount. And just to get back to the point of, yes, the people, there are a lot of people who were affected by just carrying pot around with them. You can have up to 4 ounces in your home, but honestly, those people, the laws stated that you could have marijuana in your home, but if you're going to be smoking marijuana, how are you going to get that marijuana to your home? You can grow it there, but how are you going to get the seeds there? How are you going to get the plants there? If you're going to go smoke, not at this time, smoke marijuana at somebody else's house, how are you going to get it there? These laws, currently, that we had in the past, were not just, they were not right, they were discriminating against, not at this time, they were discriminating against the people group. And therefore, when we do not enforce, when we enforce laws not equally, we break the value of having the laws. We make it so individuals do not feel safe around law enforcement agencies. We say that I'm going to be targeted, therefore I should act this way only in the presence of police officers. I should act this certain way. If we say that all law is, if I'm an African American male or anybody, I may go to I'd be, not at this time, I'd be more willing to go to the police department and report a crime because I feel that they will not discriminate against me just because of my skin color. Yes.
How can you claim that under the motion that people behind bars will be set free when anything that's still a felony is still a felony?
My point is that the laws we're talking about are the non-violent ones that, for instance, if I'm driving around town and I have less than an ounce of marijuana in my car, that wasn't a felony in the past laws. I could, however, if I was pulled over and the officers went through my car, if they had a reason to do that and they found that, I could be locked up, and I would be, I believe Sophie said, 1 in 3 times more likely to be locked up just because of my skin color. We look at we ask ourselves, will there be an advantage to applying to vacating prisons, vacating sentences? Of course there will be. Right now, the Department of Corrections states that we are running at a capacity of 101% of the local jails and prisons. That's full. We don't have room to house these non-threatening people to society, not at this time. We have, the other beauty is it'll save money. It costs more than $100 per day to house an individual in one of these correctional facilities. Why lock up a person who is non-threatening to society, not at this time? The only people would be letting out would be the 1,000 people per 100,000 individuals who are at this, who were arrested because of just the simple fact that they had a certain amount of marijuana, that they had any marijuana on their person, and that they did not commit a nonviolent crime. Because there's nonviolent crimes, we feel that they do not pose a threat to society. Because they're reintegrated with society, and if we expunge their records, this means that they can get a job, which means what? They pay taxes. So not only do we not have to pay the $100 per day, we can get money from them because now they can get an actual job and they don't have to take away from the welfare system. That's the benefit they will be able to vote. They will be able to be in public housing, which is extremely important because we found that that housing, having a place over your head, is is one of the most influential things in your life that will make you that will help you be a benefit to society. Here in Anchorage, we have the Housing First Initiative, which does not make you it does not discriminate against drug users. In the past, we have sent drug abusers down south to get treatment. We found that just giving them a place to stay is much more effective than sending them to a clinic. Because of all of these reasons, we are proud to propose this motion.
We now invite Ian Miller to the floor to summarize the debate proper. Hear, hear.
Well, that's definitely been an interesting past few minutes. I'm going to start with a few points of deconstruction. I'm going to start with a few points from the opening government position. We heard a lot about how banks and employers are able to discriminate against people who have a conviction. I still have yet to hear the answer as to why those same individuals cannot ignore such a conviction. They have that right to ignore someone having a conviction for marijuana just as much as they have the right to punish someone for it. I just have to point this one out because this one really, this really drew on me for some reason. We heard how these people are treated similarly to how pedophiles are treated, and I have to throw it out there. Pedophiles are treated like criminals because they are criminals. I don't think anyone is going to do that. And I don't think comparing people who use marijuana to pedophiles is anywhere close to a fair assessment. My next point, we heard a lot of talk from both sides of government that, we heard a lot about how discrimination. Nowhere in equal treatment of folks and anti-discrimination laws do we see anything about what drugs you use. We see sexual orientation, we see gender, we see age, we see race. We don't see if you use marijuana or not. And then we heard a lot about how following the processes are going to help you get out of these positions. I don't think anyone on the government side has ever actually been to court or served on jury duty because, frankly, these folks would be better off just finishing their sentences versus trying to follow the court process. Yeah,
Oregon, they have clinics just for expungement. They have expungement clinics, so people who don't know the process, they can find out if they can be applied to this.
All right, this is in Oregon, and the topic we're discussing tonight is all marijuana laws. So that actually takes care of one of my points for the closing government side, who kept bringing up violent marijuana laws. Nowhere in our position do we discriminate, since that seemed to be a keyword, between violent marijuana offenses versus non-violent marijuana offenses. So since statistically most of the folks who are in prison for marijuana offenses are there because they did something other than just possess it, I think that we're going to be targeting the violent folks to let them out of jail. So let's not do that. A couple deconstructions here for closing gov. We're not talking about nationwide, folks. We're talking about here in Alaska. And here in Alaska is different than nationwide. So when we hear a lot about how cops are unfairly targeting folks who are African American, last time I checked the census, African Americans are not the largest minority in the state of Alaska. Those would be Alaska Natives. So maybe we could check on that next time. The new law didn't differentiate at all between. I'll get to you. Okay. Just stay there. One of the closing government mentioned something about how you would get your marijuana to your house in order to recreationally use it. New law doesn't change that. If you can have it before, you can have it now, and we're still talking 4 ounces. I'll take it now.
You said that we don't discriminate here in Alaska, but clearly arrests
arrested in the Matsu because statistically there's more drug offenses going on in the Matsu. Last time I checked, it was heroin, crack. Welcome to the valley, folks. I'm going to build on a few points from my partner. The first point that we brought to the table was that corrections are there in order to rehabilitate folks. They're there to correct people's problems. That's in the name of corrections. That's the whole point of why we're sending people to jail. And I think most of us learned that when we were young people. If we broke mom's rules, we had to be corrected. Yeah, we might not have been in a cage, but you grow up and you go to a bigger, better place, I guess. Our second point that I want to help my partner kind of clarify a little bit was that ignoring these crimes, and by ignoring these crimes, we see that releasing people who were legally convicted of a criminal offense, by releasing those folks, that's ignoring their crime. That degrades the power of laws because society considered those things wrong at the time. If we're now going to say that society then didn't really matter, then why did we change them to begin with? I'd like to point out that when we say society had these values, it wasn't even all of society. The latest marijuana initiative only passed by 53%, and Alaska residents had at least 4 times in the past voted down legalizing marijuana. So it's hardly something that all of Alaska residents were standing behind. And at that point, that was a crime. Those folks were convicted of a crime at that point. So by ignoring those issues, we're ignoring what that crime was. We're ignoring what those issues were at the time. And frankly, where are we going to stop? If we say that we're going to ignore it now, we'll ignore it later, where are we going to stop? I'll take you real quick because we're out of time.
I just want to bring the point that it's not the margin of how much it passed, it's that it passed. It doesn't matter.
Awesome. I don't think anyone in opposition has said that it's a bad law or it was a bad ballot initiative. But the fact of the matter is the ballot initiative never said anything about releasing people who are already in jail. So just to wrap up here, I think that it's important to remember that this, just to wrap up my partner's point, we're degrading the value of not only marijuana crimes, we're degrading the value of all offenses by saying this one doesn't matter now, that one doesn't matter next time, because that's how the system works. So we can't pick and choose which rules we're going to abide by. The fact of the matter is they were a crime when they committed them. They're a crime then. That's what they were convicted of in a legal court of law. That's not going back to change the past. With that, we are proud of
I'd like to invite you to join me in giving another round of applause. These eight debaters. Our judges are making their way out to find some quiet place to contemplate these arguments. As they do, we will engage in our round ending tradition, which is a division of the House. In the division of the House, you get the chance to say whether you vote for the motion as presented, supporting the proposition side, or vote for the opposition by saying nay, opposing the motion. So let's do that now. All those who be in favor of expungement and vacation of those convictions and arrests for individuals who were arrested or convicted prior to the time that marijuana was made legal in Alaska, signify now by saying aye. Aye! And all those opposed say nay. Nay! A bit stronger from the nay side. Congratulations to the opposition. We are going to take a very short break. Hopefully our judges can contemplate their decision soon. When they're done, we will announce not only the results of this round, but also the results of the round that happened previously. Please stick around and we will let you know who's going to be debated for us on Thursday night.
The legendary debating. I know what that is. Not great. I will say that Sarah does are bad of a speaker than I ever get when I'm here. Like when I'm speaker, like people are like, handle. I was like,
I swear to the 12 people, they're waving at just kept talking up. I don't know if they're so I was like, blah, blah, blah. It was a shittier topic too. Well, I was like making more choices. I watched some of it. Oh yeah, we decided not to. Oh, okay. I really want to put it in they're already more like yeah, I feel like it should just be like a fun thing you can apply for like senator projects. And then it should be like have real senator women. Yeah, you did great. So like, it's hard. Well, good job in San I don't think that I've been in a worse speech like since I started. Yeah.